I stepped off the bus at the end of a long dirt road, my duffel bag heavy on my shoulder. The midday sun beat down on the back of my neck as I checked the address on my phone one more time. Joe Williams's farm stretched out before me, acres of cornfields on one side and what looked like soybean crops on the other. The weathered farmhouse stood about half a mile down the road with a massive red barn beside it. When my roommate told me about this summer job opportunity in rural Ontario, I jumped at it. The pay was decent, room and board included, and it would cover most of my tuition for the next semester at the University of Chicago. I'd grown up in the city, so farm work would be new, but how hard could it be? I adjusted my glasses and started walking down the dirt road. Small clouds of dust kicked up with each step. A truck approached from the direction of the farmhouse, slowing as it got closer. The driver, a tall, older man with weathered skin and a serious expression, pulled up beside me. "Marcus?" he asked, leaning across the passenger seat. His voice was gruff, but not unfriendly. "Yes, sir." "Joe Williams. Hop in." I tossed my bag in the truck bed and climbed into the passenger seat. Joe didn't say anything as he turned the truck around. His hands, I noticed, were rough and calloused, hands that had spent decades working the land. "First time on a farm?" he asked after a minute of silence. "Is it that obvious?" I smiled, trying to ease the tension. "City boys walk different." He kept his eyes on the road. "Not a problem. Work is straightforward enough. You'll learn quick." We pulled up to the farmhouse, a two-story structure that had seen better days but appeared solid. Joe parked next to a smaller building about 50 yards from the main house. "That's the farm hand quarters," he said, pointing. "You'll be staying there. Got a bedroom, bathroom, small kitchen, everything you need." I nodded. "Thanks for the opportunity, Mr. Williams. I really need this job. Call me Joe." He got out of the truck and waited for me to grab my bag. "I'll show you around, go over your duties, then we need to talk about the rules." I followed Joe as he gave me a quick tour of the property. The main areas I'd be working included the equipment shed, the vegetable garden behind the main house, and parts of the cornfield. The work seemed straightforward: maintenance, harvesting, and general upkeep. When we finished the tour, Joe led me to the porch of the main house and gestured for me to sit in one of the wooden chairs. He remained standing, arms crossed over his chest. "Now, the rules," he said, his tone shifting to something more serious. 5 of them, non-negotiable. I nodded, assuming he meant basic safety protocols or property rules. "First rule, do not go outside after sunset, for any reason." I blinked, waiting for an explanation that didn't come. "Second rule, never enter the barn at night. During daylight, fine. After dark, stay away." I glanced at the large red barn. It looked like any ordinary barn I'd seen in movies. Third rule, do not eat anything from the refrigerator in the main house. You've got your own fridge in your quarters. Use that. This was getting weird. Fourth rule, every morning check the front door of the main house for scratches. If you see any, tell me immediately. "Scratches?" I asked. "Like from an animal?" Joe ignored my question and continued. "Fifth rule, never go into the cornfield alone. Always with me or another worker." I waited for him to crack a smile, to tell me this was some kind of initiation prank they played on new farmhands. But his face remained dead serious. "That's it," he said. "Follow these rules, and you'll have a good summer here. Break them, and I'll have to let you go. Immediately." "Can I ask why these rules exist?" I tried to keep my voice respectful, though I was starting to wonder if I'd made a mistake coming here. Joe's expression hardened. "They exist because I say they do. My farm, my rules." "But no arguments," he cut me off. "You want the job or not?" I needed the money too badly to walk away. "Yes, I want the job." Joe nodded once. "Good. Get settled in." Dinner's at 6 in the main house. We start work at 5 tomorrow morning." He turned and walked into the house, leaving me sitting on the porch, confused and slightly concerned. I picked up my bag and headed to the farmhand quarters. The building was simple but clean. A single bedroom with a twin bed, a bathroom with a shower stall, and a combined kitchen, living area with a small table, 2 chairs, a worn couch, and a TV that looked at least 15 years old. The kitchen had a mini fridge, microwave, and hot plate. Basic, but it would do. I unpacked my clothes into the dresser and sat on the bed, going over the strange rules in my head. Don't go out after dark. Don't enter the barn at night. Check for scratches on the door. These weren't normal farm safety protocols. Joe had to be messing with me. Or maybe he was just paranoid. He seemed like the type who'd lived alone too long and developed odd habits. The farm was pretty isolated. Maybe he worried about trespassers or wild animals. Whatever the case, I decided I wouldn't take his rules too seriously. I'd be respectful while he was around, but I wasn't going to stress about stepping outside after dark if I needed some fresh air. And what was I supposed to do if I got hungry at night and wanted something from the main house? The whole thing was ridiculous. I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow would be my first real day of farm work. I was more concerned about waking up at 4:30 in the morning than I was about Joe's strange rules. The old man was probably harmless, just set in his ways after decades of rural isolation. As I closed my eyes to rest before dinner, I made a mental note to be polite, but not overly concerned about the bizarre restrictions. After all, what could possibly happen if I broke them? My first 2 nights on Joe's farm passed without incident. The work was hard, harder than I expected. By sunset each evening, I was so tired I collapsed into bed with muscles screaming and hands raw despite the work gloves Joe had given me. The early morning wake-up calls hit like a sledgehammer, but I adjusted quicker than I thought I would. Joe ran a tight operation, and I respected that, even if his rules still seemed bizarre. On the 3rd night, I had just finished showering when I heard it. My name, called from somewhere outside the farmhand quarters. "Marcus." I froze, towel in hand, water dripping down my back. The voice was muffled through the bathroom walls, but clear enough that I knew I hadn't imagined it. I wrapped the towel around my waist and walked into the main room, listening. Maybe Joe needed something. But it was well after sunset, nearly 10 at night. "Marcus." The voice came again, louder this time. I moved to the window and peered out into the darkness. The yard between my quarters and the main house was empty, lit only by the yellow porch light on Joe's house and the half moon overhead. "Marcus Chen." I squinted, trying to see who was calling me. The voice sounded almost like Sam, the other farmhand I'd met at dinner my first night, but something about it was wrong. Like the pitch was slightly off, or like he was speaking through water. "Sam?" I called back, not opening the window or door. "Is that you?" No answer came for several seconds. Then, "Come outside, Marcus. I need to show you something." The first rule echoed in my head. Do not go outside after sunset, for any reason. I pulled on a t-shirt and boxers, my skin prickling despite the warm night. The voice didn't sound quite right for Sam. It had his inflections, his slight accent, but distorted somehow. Like someone doing a pretty good but not perfect impression. "It's late," I called through the window. "Whatever it is can wait until morning." "Please, I found something in the cornfield. You need to see this now." My curiosity gnawed at me. What could Sam have found that was so important? And why was he out there after dark when Joe had been clear about the rules? I put my hand on the doorknob, then stopped. The rules might be strange, but Joe had been deadly serious about them. And there was something about that voice that made my skin crawl. "Sam, Joe said we're not supposed to be out after dark. You should come inside or go back to the house." The voice changed then, growing more insistent. "Marcus, Marcus, Marcus." It kept repeating my name, sometimes soft, sometimes so loud it seemed impossible that Joe couldn't hear it from the main house. I checked my phone. No signal, as usual out here. I couldn't even call the main house to check if Sam was actually there. I sat on the couch trying to ignore the voice, but it continued relentlessly. I turned on the TV, but the old set only picked up 2 channels, both fuzzy with static. The voice cut through even when I turned the volume up. Hours passed. I tried sleeping with a pillow over my head, but the voice wormed its way through. It changed sometimes, taking on different tones, pleading, commanding, whispering, shouting. Always my name. Never answering my questions when I yelled back. By 3 a.m, I was sitting in the middle of my bed, exhausted but wide awake. The voice had been calling for 5 hours straight. I'd checked every window multiple times but never saw anyone out there. Finally, as the first gray light of dawn broke across the eastern sky, the voice faded and stopped. I waited another 20 minutes to be sure, then got dressed for work. I hadn't slept at all. Joe noticed my exhaustion when I showed up at the equipment shed. "Rough night?" he asked, handing me a thermos of coffee. I hesitated, unsure whether to mention what happened. "Yeah. Had trouble sleeping." Joe looked at me for a long moment, then nodded once. "Gets quiet out here compared to the city. Takes some getting used to." I wanted to laugh. Quiet was not the problem. But something in Joe's expression stopped me from correcting him. Instead, I drank the coffee and followed him out to the fields. The next few days passed in a blur of work and fitful sleep. I didn't hear the voice again and started to wonder if maybe I'd imagined it all, some weird half-dream from my first days of exhausting farm work. About a week after that first night, I was reading in bed when I noticed a faint glow coming through my window. At first, I thought it might be headlights from a car on the distant road, but the light remained steady, not passing by. I got up and looked out the window. The barn doors were open a crack, and light spilled out from inside. Joe had shown me how to secure those doors. They shouldn't have been open. The second rule flashed in my mind: never enter the barn at night. I wasn't planning to enter it. But watching from my window didn't break any rules, right? The light flickered like a candle or lantern, casting strange shadows across the yard. Was Joe in there working late? Or Sam? As I watched, the light grew brighter. Not gradually like someone turning up a lamp, but in pulses. Bright. Brighter. Dimmer. Brighter again. No pattern I could discern, but definitely not the steady glow of normal lighting. I put on my glasses for a better look. The light had taken on a bluish tinge that didn't seem right for electric bulbs or lanterns. It reminded me of the chemical lights we'd used in science lab back in high school. My mind raced with possibilities. Maybe Joe stored some kind of equipment that gave off light, or chemicals for the crops. Maybe someone had broken in. Or maybe this was why we weren't supposed to go to the barn at night. Some kind of maintenance or fumigation process that could be dangerous. The light pulsed again, brighter than before, illuminating the whole yard between my quarters and the barn. I should tell Joe, I thought, but that would mean going outside after dark to reach the main house. I stood at the window, mesmerized by the light, for what must have been 20 minutes. The rational part of my brain said to stay inside, but another part, the curious part that had always gotten me into trouble as a kid, wondered what was creating that light. Before I realized what I was doing, I'd put on my jeans and shoes. My hand was on the doorknob. I'll just take a quick look, I told myself. I won't go in the barn. I'll stay a safe distance away. I stepped outside. The night air felt cool on my face after the stuffiness of my room. The light from the barn cast long shadows across the yard, including my own. I took a few cautious steps forward, my eyes fixed on the barn doors. That's when the light changed. It flared blindingly bright for a second, then settled into a steady glow. The barn doors swung open wider. I should go back inside. I should definitely go back inside right now. But I didn't move. I stood frozen, staring directly at the light coming from the barn, unable to look away. A figure appeared in the doorway. At first, I thought it was Joe or Sam, but as it stepped into the yard, I realized it was neither. Its body was humanoid, 2 arms, 2 legs, standing upright, but its head was that of a cow. Not a costume or mask, but an actual cow's head, with hollow eyes that reflected the blue light. Its neck bent at an impossible angle to support the massive head on a human-sized body. The arms were too long, hanging down past what should have been its knees. The legs bent sideways at the joints, like they'd been broken and reset wrong. It moved with jerky, uncoordinated steps, but it was coming straight toward me. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I tried to run, but my feet felt rooted to the ground. All I could do was stare as the thing shambled closer across the yard, its cow head swaying with each step. 20 feet, 15 feet. The creature was close enough now that I could hear its breathing, wet, labored sounds that no human or cow should make. When it reached the halfway point of the yard, maybe 20 feet from where I stood, something in me finally snapped. I turned and ran back to my quarters, slammed the door, and locked it. I backed away until I hit the far wall, then slid down to the floor. Through the window, I could still see the blue light from the barn. I didn't look directly at it again. I didn't want to know if the creature was still out there, still coming toward my door. I sat there on the floor all night, knees pulled up to my chest, too terrified to move, too terrified even to close my eyes. The first rays of dawn broke through my window, finding me still huddled against the wall, eyes burning from a night without sleep. The cow-headed figure had disappeared sometime in the early morning hours, but I stayed frozen in place, afraid to move until full daylight confirmed it was gone. My muscles protested as I finally stood, legs numb from sitting in the same position all night. I couldn't decide if what I'd seen was real or a hallucination born from exhaustion and the strange voice that had called my name nights before. Either way, I needed to talk to Joe. I stumbled to my tiny bathroom, splashed water on my face, and avoided my reflection. I knew what I'd see. Red eyes, pale skin, the look of someone unraveling. Work would start soon, and I wasn't ready to face Joe yet. I needed coffee first, something to steady my nerves. The main house kitchen had a proper coffee maker, unlike the instant stuff in my quarters. Joe had told me I could use it any time, and despite everything that happened, I craved the normalcy of a morning routine. The walk to the main house took less than a minute, but I checked over my shoulder repeatedly, half expecting to see that thing standing in the yard watching me. The back door was unlocked as usual. I stepped into the kitchen, grateful for its ordinary appearance. Wooden table, 4 chairs, countertops with a few dirty dishes from last night's dinner. Normal. Safe. I filled the coffee maker and waited for it to brew, trying to organize my thoughts. What would I even say to Joe? I saw a monster with a cow's head coming out of your barn last night. He'd think I was crazy, or worse, he'd believe me, which somehow seemed even more terrifying. The coffee finished brewing. I opened the refrigerator to get milk. What I saw inside made me forget how to breathe. Glass jars filled every shelf. Not food jars, specimen jars. Each contained something floating in yellowish liquid. Organs, tissue, things I couldn't identify. Some looked animal, what might have been a pig's heart, a section of intestine, other parts I couldn't name, but others. One jar at eye level contained what was unmistakably a human eye. Pale blue iris, cloudy from preservation. I started to close the door, but stopped when I realized something impossible. The eye moved, following my motion. I slammed the refrigerator shut, coffee forgotten. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. Had I imagined it? I had to check again. Slowly, I pulled the refrigerator door open once more. The jars remained, dozens of them, filling every available space. The eye jar sat exactly where it had been before. I moved slightly to the left. The eye shifted, tracking me. I backed away, letting the door swing closed. Whatever was happening on this farm, it wasn't normal. It wasn't natural. And Joe knew about it. The third rule suddenly made perfect sense. Never eat anything from the refrigerator in the main house. I left my coffee untouched and hurried outside, gulping fresh air. Joe would be waiting at the equipment shed. I needed to get to work, to pretend everything was fine while I figured out what to do next. When I arrived at the shed, Joe looked up from the tractor part he was cleaning. "You look like hell," he said, no warmth in his voice, just observation. "Bad night," I managed. "Didn't sleep much." Joe studied me for a long moment. "Heard anything unusual last night?" My mouth went dry. Did he know? Had he seen me outside? "No," I lied. "Just insomnia, I guess." Joe nodded, but his eyes stayed on me longer than comfortable. "Happens sometimes out here. The quiet gets to city folks." We worked in the fields all day. I kept waiting for Joe to mention the barn or ask why I'd been outside after dark, but he said nothing about it. By lunchtime, I almost convinced myself I'd dreamed the whole thing. The voice calling my name, the blue light from the barn, the cow-headed figure. Stress and exhaustion playing tricks on my mind. But I couldn't explain away what I'd seen in the refrigerator. Those jars were real. The eye that followed me was real. As we finished work that evening, Joe called out to me before I could head back to my quarters. "Marcus, did you check the front door this morning?" The fourth rule. I'd completely forgotten. "No, sir, Joe. Sorry, I forgot." His face hardened. "Don't forget again. Every morning, first thing." I nodded, shame mixing with fear. I'd already broken 2 rules, going outside after dark and failing to check the door. And after what I'd seen, I understood these weren't arbitrary restrictions. They existed for reasons I was starting to grasp, even if Joe wouldn't explain them. The next morning I woke early and went straight to the main house. I approached the front door cautiously, half afraid of what I might find. The heavy wooden door looked normal. Weathered oak with a brass knob and mail slot. No scratches, no marks of any kind. I exhaled with relief and headed to work. Checking the door became part of my morning routine. Each day before sunrise, I'd walk to the main house and inspect the front door. Each day I found nothing unusual, just smooth wood grain under my fingertips. I never opened the refrigerator again. I bought extra food for my quarters on our weekly supply run to town. Joe noticed but didn't comment. The voice calling my name returned twice more during those weeks. Each time I stayed inside with pillows over my ears until dawn. I never saw the cow-headed figure again, but sometimes at night the blue light flickered from the barn. I kept the curtains drawn and tried not to look. 3 weeks passed this way. Working during the day, hiding in my quarters at night, checking the door each morning. I convinced myself I could make it through the summer. The pay was good, and despite everything, the work itself wasn't bad. Joe kept his distance but seemed satisfied with my performance. Then came Tuesday morning. I approached the front door as usual, barely awake, moving on autopilot. At first, my brain didn't process what I was seeing. The door looked wrong, textured, almost fuzzy from a distance. As I got closer, I realized what I was seeing. Deep claw marks covered the entire surface from top to bottom. Not random scratches, deliberate, methodical gouges that ran vertically down the door. They looked fresh, the wood splintered and pale where it had been torn. Whatever had made those marks had powerful claws. Each gouge was at least half an inch deep, and the pattern suggested intelligence, not an animal randomly scratching. This was systematic, purposeful. I backed away, nearly tripping on the porch steps. Joe needed to see this. He'd know what to do. I found him in the soybean field, checking irrigation lines. He looked up as I approached, his face questioning. "The door," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "There are scratches all over it." Joe dropped the tool he was holding. "Show me." We walked back to the house in silence, Joe moving faster than I'd ever seen him move. When he saw the front door, his face went white. "Go to the shed," he said, voice tight with controlled fear. "Get me the toolbox and the sheet of plywood leaning against the back wall." I ran to follow his instructions. When I returned, Joe was running his hand over the scratches, his expression grim. "What made these?" I asked, setting down the items he'd requested. He didn't answer. Instead, he opened the toolbox and began removing the damaged door from its hinges. "Get the stepladder from the barn," he said, "and the roll of heavy plastic." I hesitated at the mention of the barn, remembering the blue light, the figure. But it was daytime. The second rule only forbade entering at night. I retrieved the items and spent the rest of the day helping Joe install the plywood as a temporary door. Then we covered all the windows with plastic sheeting, securing the edges with staples and duct tape. Joe moved with urgency but precision, checking each window twice to make sure the plastic was tight against the frame. "What are we protecting against?" I finally asked as we finished the last window. Joe paused, hammer in hand. For a moment, I thought he might actually explain. "Weather," he said finally. "Storm coming." I looked up at the clear blue sky, not a cloud in sight. "Forecast says it'll hit tonight," he added, avoiding my eyes. It was a lie, and we both knew it, but I nodded anyway, too afraid of the truth to push further. That night, I lay awake in my bed, listening to the sounds outside. No storm came, but something moved in the yard between my quarters and the main house. Something large that made the ground vibrate slightly with each step. I didn't look out the window. I didn't want to see what had left those claw marks on the door. Instead, I pulled my blanket over my head like a child and pretended I was back in Chicago, surrounded by the comforting noise of the city instead of whatever lurked in the darkness of Joe Williams's farm. I woke up with a headache pounding behind my eyes, my blanket twisted around my legs from a night of restless sleep. Morning light filtered through the thin curtains of my quarters, signaling another day on Joe's farm. Getting dressed for work felt like moving through water. My muscles ached from tension, and dark circles had formed under my eyes from weeks of poor sleep. I trudged to the main house first thing to check the front door as required. The plywood replacement Joe had installed remained intact. No new scratches. Small mercies. Joe didn't mention the previous night when I met him at the equipment shed, and I didn't ask. We settled into our usual morning routine, going through the list of tasks for the day while the sun climbed higher in the sky. About halfway through, the back door of the shed swung open. "Morning, boss. Sorry I'm late." Sam Rodriguez strolled in, cap pulled low over his eyes, work gloves already on. He'd been working on the farm since before I arrived, and unlike me, he seemed completely at ease here. Joe barely acknowledged him with a nod before continuing with his instructions. I'd met Sam my first night at dinner, but our paths didn't cross much during work hours. Joe usually sent us to opposite ends of the property. Today was different. Joe assigned us both to repair irrigation lines in the east fields, then left to work on the tractor. "So," Sam said as we walked toward the storage area to gather supplies. "Another night of weird noises, huh? You look like you got hit by a truck." I glanced at him, surprised. "You heard something too?" Sam laughed. "Nah, man. I slept like a baby, but you've got those city boy jitters written all over your face. Let me guess. Wind in the cornfield freaked you out again." I wanted to tell him about the footsteps, about the creature I'd seen weeks ago, about the jars in the refrigerator, but something stopped me. Sam had been here longer than I had, yet he acted like there was nothing unusual about the farm. Either he knew and didn't care, or he hadn't experienced any of it. "Just having trouble adjusting to country quiet," I said. repeating what Joe had told me before. Sam shook his head, amused. You know what your problem is? You take Old Man Williams too seriously. All those rules. They're just his way of keeping control. Power trip, you know? We loaded tools onto a small utility cart. The day stretched hot and clear ahead of us, the kind of summer day that made the rules seem absurd in the harsh light. The rules are important to Joe, I said carefully. It's his farm. Important to Joe? Sam mimicked, rolling his eyes. Come on, man. You can't tell me you actually believe that stuff about not going outside after dark? What's gonna get you? The boogeyman? If only he knew how close to the truth he was. I'm just trying to keep my job, I said. Sam laughed again. Sure. Hey, between us, I break those stupid rules all the time. Nothing ever happens. That stopped me in my tracks. You go outside at night? Sometimes, when I need a smoke. He pulled a pack of cigarettes from his pocket. Joe doesn't allow these in the quarters. Fire hazard, he says, so I step out. Been doing it for 3 summers now. I thought about the voice calling my name in the darkness, about the blue light from the barn, the cow-headed figure walking across the yard. What about the barn? I asked, trying to sound casual. You ever go in there at night? Something flickered across Sam's face. Hesitation. But it vanished quickly. Nah, no reason to. But I bet it's just full of regular farm stuff. Old man probably keeps his porn stash in there or something. We spent the morning fixing irrigation lines, working our way slowly across the east field. Sam kept up a steady stream of chatter, mostly complaints about Joe and his control issues. I stayed quiet, focusing on the work. After lunch, we needed more connectors from the storage shed near the cornfield. As we approached, I noticed Sam watching the tall green stalks swaying in the light breeze. You ever been in there alone? I asked, nodding toward the cornfield. The corn? Sure, Sam shrugged. It's just corn. But that's one of the rules. Never enter the cornfield alone. Sam's laugh was sharp this time. Man, you are deep in the Kool-Aid, aren't you? It's corn. Plants. What's it gonna do, eat me? I remembered Joe's face when he explained that rule, the deadly seriousness in his eyes. I just think there must be a reason, I said. Yeah, the reason is Joe Williams is a controlling old man who's been alone on this farm too long. Sam picked up a handful of dirt and let it sift through his fingers. Gets to you after a while, all this isolation. Makes you create monsters where there aren't any. We finished loading supplies and headed back to continue our work. The afternoon grew hotter, the sun beating down on our backs. Around 2, we ran out of pipe connectors again. I'll go get more, Sam said, wiping sweat from his forehead. I'll come with you, I offered, standing up. Nah, finish setting those valves. I'll be quicker on my own. I hesitated. We should go together, Joe said. Sam mimicked. Look, the storage shed is right by the cornfield. I'm going to grab the connectors, and then I'm taking a shortcut through the corn back to here. It'll save 15 minutes of walking around the perimeter. My mouth went dry. That's breaking Rule 5. Don't go in the cornfield alone. Sam stared at me for a long moment, then shook his head. You know what? I'm going to do it just to prove to you that nothing will happen. These rules are bullshit, man. Joe's messing with your head. Sam, don't... What's going to get me in a cornfield at 2 in the afternoon, huh? He spread his arms wide. Aliens, ghosts, the corn monster. I didn't know what to say. Part of me thought he might be right. Maybe the rules were just Joe's way of maintaining control. But I'd seen things, heard things. The claw marks on the door were real. Just wait 5 minutes. I'll finish this valve, then we'll both go. But Sam was already walking away. See you on the other side, city boy. I'll wave from the cornfield when nothing happens. I called after him, but he just waved without turning around. I watched him walk to the storage shed, collect what we needed, then stand at the edge of the cornfield. He turned toward me, gave an exaggerated salute, and stepped between the tall stalks. The corn swallowed him whole. I kept working, glancing up every few minutes, expecting to see Sam emerge further down the field. 5 minutes passed. 10. The heat made it hard to focus, sweat dripping into my eyes. After 20 minutes, I stood up and walked to where I could see the full length of the cornfield. No sign of movement, no Sam coming out anywhere along the edge. He should have reached our work site by now. "Sam," I called out, my voice sounding thin in the heavy summer air. No response. I walked along the perimeter of the cornfield, calling his name periodically. Nothing. The corn stood tall and still, no breeze now to move the thick green stalks. I checked my watch. He'd been gone almost 40 minutes. I debated going in after him. But Rule 5 echoed in my head. Never enter the cornfield alone. If I went in looking for Sam, I'd be breaking the same rule he had. And after what I'd seen on this farm already, I wasn't eager to find out the consequences. Instead, I returned to our work site and waited, convinced he'd appear any minute with a stupid grin, laughing at how worried I'd gotten. But as the afternoon wore on, that hope faded. By 5 o'clock, I knew something was wrong. I found Joe near the barn, working on the tractor engine. "Joe," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Sam went into the cornfield alone about 3 hours ago. He hasn't come out." Joe froze, his hands still inside the engine compartment. Slowly, he straightened up and turned to face me. The look in his eyes made my stomach drop. When exactly did he go in? And where? I explained about the shortcut Sam had planned to take, how he'd mocked the rules, how long he'd been missing. Joe wiped his hands on a rag with deliberate slowness, but I could see tension in every line of his body. "We need to search," he said finally. "But not alone. Never alone in the corn." Joe called the local sheriff, then a few neighbors I hadn't met before. Within an hour, 8 men had gathered at the farm. Joe organized them into pairs, assigning each duo a section of the cornfield to search. He paired himself with me. "Stay close," he said as we entered the corn together. "Never lose sight of each other. If you see anything at all, that doesn't look right, you tell me immediately." The cornfield felt different from inside. The stalks stood 8 feet tall, blocking out much of the light. Rows that had looked orderly from outside became a maze once you were surrounded. Sound behaved strangely too. Voices from the other search pairs seemed to come from changing directions, sometimes near, sometimes far away. We called Sam's name over and over. The only answers were our echoes and the occasional shout from other searchers. As dusk approached, Joe pulled a flashlight from his pocket. "We keep looking," he said, "after dark if we have to." The night search was worse. Flashlight beams cut through the corn, creating moving shadows that played tricks on the eyes. Every rustle sounded like footsteps. Every shadow looked like a figure standing just beyond the light's reach. We searched until nearly midnight before Joe finally called it off. "We'll start again at first light," he told the exhausted group of men gathered in his yard. "Thank you all for coming out." After they left, Joe sat heavily on his porch steps. I stood awkwardly nearby, not sure what to say. "You told him about the rules?" Joe asked finally. "Yes. He didn't believe they mattered." Joe nodded slowly. "They always think that at first." I wanted to ask what he meant by "they" and "at first." I wanted to ask about the cow-headed figure, about the jars in the refrigerator, about the claw marks on the door. But the haunted look on Joe's face stopped me. The search resumed at dawn. More people joined, including state police with dogs. They combed through the cornfield row by row, foot by foot. The dogs barked and whined but found no scent trail. By the end of the day, they'd covered the entire field and found nothing. No footprints, no broken stalks, no sign that Sam had ever entered the corn at all. The official search continued for 2 more days. Police interviewed Joe and me separately multiple times. They checked Sam's quarters, his phone records, his bank accounts. Nothing indicated he'd planned to leave. His car remained parked behind the farmhand quarters. His wallet and phone were found in his room. All his clothes still hung in the closet. Sam Rodriguez had simply vanished. After the police left on the third day, declaring it a missing persons case with no evidence of foul play, Joe approached me in the equipment shed. "We're behind on work," he said, his voice flat. "I've called in a replacement. He'll be here tomorrow morning." I stared at him. "That's it? Sam is gone and we just replace him?" Joe's face hardened. "What would you have me do? The work doesn't stop. The crops don't stop growing." "But what happened to him? You know something, don't you? You know why the rules exist." For a moment, I thought Joe might actually explain. His eyes met mine, and I saw conflict there, maybe even guilt. But then the shutters came down again. "The new worker's name is Mike. He'll take over Sam's quarters, make sure they're cleaned out before he arrives." That evening, I packed up Sam's belongings as instructed. His clothes, toiletries, the few books and magazines he kept beside his bed. It felt wrong, erasing him so quickly, as if he'd never been here at all. I found a photo tucked in his dresser drawer, Sam with an older woman, probably his mother, both smiling at the camera. I put it aside, thinking I should send it to his family, then realized I didn't know how to contact them. The police would handle that, I supposed. The next morning, Mike arrived, a quiet older man who nodded when Joe explained the 5 rules. He didn't question them or make jokes. He just accepted them as conditions of employment, the way I should have from the beginning. Joe never mentioned Sam again. In meetings, at meals, during work. It was as if the third farmhand had never existed. The only acknowledgement was the small missing poster the sheriff's department put up at the end of our road, Sam's smiling face looking out from beneath bold black letters. I found myself watching the cornfield differently after that. Even in broad daylight, the gentle swaying of the stalks seemed threatening, hiding something just out of sight. At night, I sometimes thought I heard Sam's voice calling my name, but I couldn't be sure if it was real or just my imagination blending with the wind. What I did know was that Joe's rules weren't arbitrary. They weren't the product of an isolated mind or a power trip. They existed for a reason that had cost Sam Rodriguez everything. Sam's disappearance changed everything on the farm. The days that followed turned into the most terrifying weeks of my life, as the supernatural activity escalated beyond anything I could have imagined. Whatever strange presence inhabited Joe's land no longer tried to hide itself from me. The voice returned the very night after the search parties left. It started as a whisper outside my window around 10 o'clock. Just my name at first, soft and almost questioning. By midnight, it had grown to a desperate wail that cut through my pillow, through my hands pressed over my ears, through every attempt to block it out. "Marcus Chen," it called, sometimes in Sam's voice, sometimes in voices I didn't recognize. "Come outside, Marcus Chen." I stayed huddled on my bed, lights on, back pressed against the wall. The voice continued until dawn, as it did every night after that. I managed maybe 2 hours of sleep on good nights, often none at all. My hands shook constantly. Dark circles formed under my eyes. I dropped things, forgot instructions, and jumped at the slightest sound. Joe noticed but said nothing. He just watched me with an unreadable expression, occasionally assigning me lighter tasks when my exhaustion became too obvious. Mike, the new farmhand who replaced Sam, kept to himself. He followed Joe's rules without question, and never mentioned the strange noises at night. I wondered if he heard them too, or if I was the only one being tormented. 3 days after Sam vanished, I saw the cow-headed creature again. I was washing dishes in my quarters when movement outside caught my eye. There it stood in the yard between my building and the main house, that impossible figure with its bovine head perched on a human-like body, arms hanging too long at its sides. It didn't move toward me this time. It just stood there, staring at my window with those hollow eye sockets. I dropped to the floor, heart racing, and crawled away from the window. When I finally gathered the courage to peek out again an hour later, it was gone. But it came back the next night, and the next. Sometimes it stood motionless for hours. Other times it walked around the yard with those jerky, uncoordinated movements. Once I saw it testing the door to my quarters, its elongated fingers wrapping around the handle, pushing and pulling with methodical patience. I pushed my dresser in front of the door after that night. 2 weeks after Sam disappeared, Joe called me to the main house early in the morning. "Front door," he said when I arrived, his face grim. Fresh claw marks covered the plywood he had installed to replace the original door. These were deeper than before, more frenzied. Whatever had made them had struck with enough force to splinter the wood in places, nearly punching through. Joe didn't speak as we replaced the damaged plywood with a new sheet. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, suggesting he'd done this many times before. I wanted to ask questions about Sam, about the creature, about the voices, but the set of his jaw warned me against it. 4 days later, it happened again. More claw marks, deeper this time, with strange symbols carved between them. Joe replaced the plywood without comment. The refrigerator became another source of horror. I never opened it again after seeing that moving eye, but I knew things were changing inside. The door didn't close properly anymore. It bulged slightly, as if too full. Dark liquid began to seep from the bottom, forming a small puddle on the kitchen floor that Joe wiped up each morning without explanation. Once, I came into the kitchen while Joe was cleaning that puddle. The refrigerator door was open just a crack, and I caught a glimpse of movement inside. Not just one eye tracking me, but dozens of things shifting and pulsing in their jars. Joe slammed the door shut when he noticed me looking. "Breakfast in 5 minutes," he said, as if nothing was wrong. I ate less and less. Food had no taste anymore, and eating reminded me too much of what might be growing in that refrigerator. I lost weight. My clothes hung loose on my frame. Mike asked once if I was sick, and I couldn't find the words to explain what was happening to me. By the 5th week, the blue light from the barn glowed every night, so bright it seeped through my closed curtains. I could hear strange mechanical sounds coming from inside, grinding, whirring, occasional wet noises that made me think of slaughterhouses. The cow-headed thing wasn't alone anymore. I caught glimpses of other figures moving between the barn and the cornfield, humanoid shapes with mismatched parts, walking with that same jerky motion. I started keeping a baseball bat beside my bed, though I knew it would be useless against whatever these things were. The 6th week broke me. Monday night, I woke to find the cow-headed creature standing at the foot of my bed. I hadn't heard it enter. The dresser still blocked the door. Yet there it stood, swaying slightly, its massive head tilted at an unnatural angle. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. I just stared as it reached one elongated arm toward me, fingers stretching impossibly. I must have blacked out from terror. When I came to, dawn light filled the room, and the creature was gone. The only evidence of its visit was a deep gouge in the wooden footboard of my bed, a mark identical to those on the front door. I spent that day in a daze, my mind shutting down to protect itself. Joe kept looking at me with what might have been concern, but I couldn't bring myself to care anymore. This farm was killing me. If I stayed much longer, I'd end up like Sam, gone without a trace. Tuesday evening, I made my decision. I found Joe in the equipment shed working on the tractor engine again. "I'm leaving," I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "Tomorrow morning." Joe straightened up slowly, wiping grease from his hands. "Your contract runs through August. I don't care about the contract. I'm leaving." He studied my face for a long moment. "You look terrible." I laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. I haven't slept in weeks. There's a monster with a cow's head in my room at night. Voices call my name until dawn. And Sam is gone because he broke one of your rules that you won't explain." Joe's expression didn't change. "You're not well, Marcus. You need rest. What I need is to get off this farm. If it's about the money, it's not about the money. I can pay you more," he continued as if I hadn't spoken. "Half again what we agreed. And a bonus when the season ends." I shook my head. "Keep your money. I want answers." Joe turned back to the tractor, shoulders tense. "Everything has an explanation." "Then give me one. What's in the barn at night? What makes those claw marks? What happened to Sam? What's in those jars in your refrigerator?" He flinched at the mention of the refrigerator, but didn't turn around. "This is farm country," he said finally. "Things work differently here. City people don't understand." "That's not an explanation. That's an excuse." Joe sighed, setting down his wrench. "The rules keep you safe. If you follow them, I've followed them. I've checked that door every morning. I've stayed inside after dark. I've never gone into the barn at night or the cornfield alone. I've done everything you asked, and I'm still not safe." My voice echoed in the shed, louder than I intended. Joe turned to face me, and for the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes. "It will get better," he said quietly. "They're just testing you, like they did with the others before. Once they know you respect the boundaries, they? Who are they, Joe?" He shook his head. "I can't explain it in a way you'd understand. Just know that if you stay, if you keep following the rules, it will get better. I promise." His promise meant nothing. 6 weeks of terror had taught me that much. "I'm leaving in the morning," I repeated. "I'll pack tonight." Joe stepped toward me, one hand outstretched. "Marcus, please, you can't go now. Not when things are active. Give it another week. Just one more week." The desperation in his voice almost made me reconsider. Almost. "I'm sorry," I said, backing toward the door. "I can't stay another night." I returned to my quarters and began throwing clothes into my duffel bag. My hands shook with exhaustion and fear, but the decision to leave gave me a burst of energy I hadn't felt in weeks. I was getting out. I would drive straight to Chicago without stopping. I would put this farm and its horrors behind me. As darkness fell, the voice started again, earlier than usual and louder. It called my name from every direction, no longer trying to lure me outside, but seeming angry now, threatening. The windows rattled with its force. I covered my ears and continued packing. Just one more night. I could survive one more night. The cow-headed creature appeared outside my window around 9, pressing its face against the glass. I closed the curtains and kept packing. More voices joined the first, a chorus of them calling my name in different tones, pleading, commanding, mocking. I turned on my small radio to drown them out, but they cut through any noise I made. Sleep was impossible that night. I sat on my bed, fully dressed, bags packed, waiting for dawn. Every minute stretched into an eternity. The voices grew so loud the walls seemed to vibrate with them. The roof creaked as if something heavy walked across it. Scratching sounds came from all sides, the windows, the door, even the floor beneath my bed. When the first hint of light appeared on the horizon, I grabbed my bags and headed for the door. The dresser I'd pushed against it had moved during the night, now standing at an angle that left just enough space for the door to open. I hadn't moved it. I hadn't heard it move. I squeezed through the gap and ran to my car, throwing my bags in the back seat. The key shook in my hand as I tried to fit it into the ignition. A knock on my window made me jump. Joe stood beside the car, looking as if he hadn't slept either. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face haggard. I lowered the window just a crack. "I'm leaving." "I know," he said, his voice rough. "But I need to try one more time. Whatever you've seen, whatever you've heard, It's not what you think." "Then what is it?" He rubbed a hand over his face. "This land, it's special. Different. What lives here has been here longer than any of us. They have rules, boundaries. When you respect those boundaries, they leave you alone. When you don't, like Sam," I said. Joe nodded slowly. "Like Sam, and the others before him who didn't listen. And the voices, the cowhead thing, the jars in your refrigerator? They communicate in ways we don't understand," Joe said, the words coming faster now, as if he was afraid I'd drive away before he finished. "They take forms from our minds, our fears, and they preserve things, keep samples." "Samples of what?" Joe looked away. "Of us, of everything living on this land." A chill ran through me. "Why? What are they doing with them?" "I don't know exactly. Learning, maybe, or just collecting. It's been happening for generations on this farm. My grandfather made the rules after incidents. They've kept the peace ever since." I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. "So you know your farm is haunted by monsters that collect body parts, and you still hire people to work here? Without warning them. Would you have believed me if I told you the truth on day one?" Joe asked, eyes meeting mine again. Would anyone? He had a point. I wouldn't have believed him. I would have thought he was crazy and left immediately. Maybe that would have been better for everyone. "I'm still leaving," I said. "If you go now in this state, they might follow you," Joe warned, his voice dropping to a whisper. "They don't like being disrespected, breaking contracts. That's why I'm asking you to stay just one more week. Let things calm down. Let them see you're not a threat. I'm not staying another night on this farm." Joe's face hardened. "I can't force you, but I'm warning you, Marcus. What's here might not stay here if you leave like this. The rules work both ways." Was he threatening me, or genuinely trying to warn me? I couldn't tell anymore. All I knew was that I needed to get away from this place before I lost my mind completely, if I hadn't already. "Goodbye, Joe," I said, starting the engine. He stepped back from the car, shoulders slumped in defeat. "If you change your mind, the job is still open. And Marcus," I looked at him, hand on the gear shift. "Be careful out there. Some boundaries, once crossed, can't be uncrossed." I drove away without responding, gravel crunching under my tires as I headed down the long dirt road toward the highway. In my rearview mirror, I could see Joe standing in the yard, watching me go. Behind him, barely visible in the early morning light, a tall figure stood at the edge of the cornfield, its cow head tilted at that unnatural angle, following my car with those hollow eye sockets. I pressed the accelerator harder, not looking back again. I kept the speedometer at 80 all the way to the highway, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. The gravel road rattled my old Honda as I swerved around potholes, desperate to put distance between me and Joe's farm. Every few seconds, I checked my rearview mirror, half expecting to see that cow-headed thing following me down the road. 3 hours later, I crossed the state line. My hands still hadn't stopped shaking. I pulled into a gas station just to breathe for a minute, to convince myself I was really getting away. The normalcy of it hit me like a punch. People pumping gas, buying coffee, going about their regular lives. A woman scolded her kids for fighting over a candy bar. A man in a business suit checked his phone while his tank filled. None of them knew what existed back on that farm. None of them had rules they needed to follow to survive the night. I filled my tank without going inside the store. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I didn't want to explain my bloodshot eyes or dirty clothes or the way I kept looking over my shoulder. I paid at the pump and got back on the road. The summer sun beat down as I drove, but I felt cold inside. 6 weeks of my life gone, along with most of the money I'd already earned. I'd left so quickly I hadn't even asked Joe for my pay. Not that it mattered. No amount of money was worth staying another night. Somewhere around noon, my phone buzzed with a text. I nearly drove off the road grabbing for it, then pulled onto the shoulder to read the message safely. Unknown number. Did you make it off the property? My stomach dropped. I hadn't given Joe my phone number. Me. Who is this? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Unknown number. Joe. Borrowed Mike's phone. Did you cross the county line? I stared at the screen. How had he gotten my number? Why did it matter if I crossed the county line? Me. Yes. Hours ago. Don't contact me again. I blocked the number and tossed my phone onto the passenger seat. My hands started shaking again. I pulled back onto the highway, pushing my car faster than before. I drove straight through to Chicago, stopping only for gas and bathroom breaks. I didn't eat. I didn't call anyone. I just drove, watching the rural landscape gradually give way to suburbs and then the familiar city skyline. When I finally parked outside my apartment building near campus, the sun had already set. For a split second, panic gripped me. It was after dark. I wasn't supposed to be outside after dark. Then reality crashed back in. I wasn't on the farm anymore. That rule didn't apply here. Did it? I ran from my car to the building entrance anyway, fumbling with my keys at the door. The empty hallway stretched before me, lit by flickering fluorescent bulbs that made the shadows dance on the walls. I took the stairs 2 at a time, not trusting the ancient elevator. My roommate wasn't home when I unlocked our apartment door. A note on the refrigerator said he was staying at his girlfriend's place for the week. I was alone. The silence pressed in around me. I checked every room, turned on all the lights, and then sat on the couch waiting for something. A voice calling my name, scratching at the windows, the sound of heavy footsteps outside my door. Nothing came. Just normal city sounds, traffic, distant sirens, the hum of the refrigerator. I sat there until 3 in the morning, too afraid to sleep, too exhausted to do anything else. When I finally dragged myself to bed, I pushed my dresser in front of the door first. The next few weeks passed in a blur. I picked up delivery shifts at a local restaurant to make up for the lost summer income. I avoided my roommate's questions about why I'd come back early, mumbling something about the job not working out. I jumped at unexpected noises and kept all the lights on at night. I checked the locks repeatedly before trying to sleep. Sleep, when it came, brought nightmares. The cow-headed thing standing at the foot of my bed. Sam walking into the cornfield, never to return. Joe replacing the front door again and again as those claw marks grew deeper. I told no one about what happened. Who would believe me? A farm with supernatural rules and monsters hiding in the barn. Talking about it would only make people think I was crazy. Maybe I was. July turned to August. The new semester approached. I threw myself into preparations, buying textbooks, scheduling classes, doing anything to keep my mind occupied. If I stayed busy enough, maybe I could forget. But I didn't forget. On quiet nights, I still heard voices calling my name. Sometimes I woke, convinced the cow-headed creature was in my room, watching me from the corner. I developed a routine of checking under my bed and in my closet before lying down, like a child afraid of monsters. The difference was I knew the monsters were real. My roommate noticed the changes in me. "Dude, you seem really on edge lately," he said one evening as I triple-checked the locks. "Everything okay?" "Fine," I lied. "Just stressed about the semester." He didn't push, but I caught him watching me sometimes, concern in his eyes. I couldn't explain that I was checking for claw marks on our door every morning, or that I refused to open our refrigerator without preparing myself first. Classes started in September. The familiar routine of lectures and assignments should have been comforting, but I struggled to focus. During a night class that ran until 9, I had a panic attack thinking about walking back to my apartment in the dark. My professor called campus security to escort me home, probably thinking I was afraid of muggers or campus crime. I couldn't tell him I was afraid of something with a cow's head and arms that hung down to its knees. The weeks turned to months. Fall came with cooler temperatures and shorter days. The career fair approached, and my advisor suggested I look for an internship for the following summer. "There's a great opportunity with an agricultural research station in downstate Illinois," she said, pointing to a listing. "Given your major, it would be perfect." I shook my head so hard my glasses nearly flew off. "No farms? Nothing rural?" She gave me a strange look. "It would really boost your resume." I said no. My voice came out sharper than intended. "Sorry, I need to stay in the city." After that, I avoided the career office entirely. I found a summer position at a lab downtown, even though it paid less and offered fewer learning opportunities. The important thing was that it kept me in Chicago, surrounded by concrete and steel and millions of people. Safe, or so I thought. In November, I saw a missing person poster that stopped me cold. Not Sam. I checked the local papers and online news sites regularly for any mention of him. This was a different person, a woman named Elena Reyes, reported missing from a farm in the next county over from Joe's. The article mentioned she had been a temporary worker who vanished without taking any of her belongings. The similarities made my skin crawl. I printed the article and added it to a folder I'd started keeping, news reports of strange disappearances in rural areas, unexplained phenomena on farms, local legends about cursed land. The folder grew thicker as winter approached. Was I becoming obsessed? Probably. But I couldn't shake the feeling that what happened on Joe's farm wasn't isolated, that whatever lived there might exist in other places too. Sometimes I thought about calling the police, telling them what I knew about Sam. But what did I actually know? That he walked into a cornfield and never came out? That strange things happened on Joe's farm? I had no proof, just my increasingly fragile mental state and wild stories about monsters that no one would believe. Christmas break came, and my parents wanted me to come home to their new house in rural Michigan. I made excuses, study commitments, a part-time job that didn't exist, anything to avoid leaving the city. They didn't understand, but they accepted my decision. I spent the holidays alone in my apartment, jumping at every sound, sleeping with the lights on. By spring, my roommate had stopped inviting me to parties or social events. My grades had slipped from straight A's to barely passing. Dark circles became permanent fixtures under my eyes, but I was functioning more or less. I told myself that time would eventually heal the trauma, that the memories would fade if I just pushed them down deep enough. Then the dreams started. Not nightmares. I was used to those. These were different, more vivid, more real. In these dreams, I stood at the edge of Joe's cornfield at sunset, watching the golden light play across the swaying stalks. Sam would emerge from between the rows, walking backward, his eyes fixed on something behind him that I couldn't see. "It's not what you think," he would say, his voice distorted just like the voice that had called my name that first night. "It's so much bigger than we knew." Then he would beckon me to follow him back into the corn. I always woke up before I took that step, gasping and drenched in sweat. The dreams came every night for a week straight. I started drinking coffee by the pot to avoid sleeping. When exhaustion finally claimed me, the dreams returned, more intense each time. On the 7th night, something changed. In the dream, I finally followed Sam into the cornfield. The stalks closed around us, cutting off the light, but I could still see him walking ahead of me. "What happened to you?" I called after him. He turned, and in the dream, his face shifted. Human one moment, then something else. Something with too many eyes and a mouth that opened wider than possible. "They're coming to find you," he said, his voice overlapping with others. "You left before the agreement was complete." I woke up screaming. My roommate pounded on my door, asking if I was okay. I told him it was just a bad dream. He didn't believe me, but he left me alone. The next day, I found a letter in my campus mailbox. No return address, no postmark. Just my name written in shaky handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 5 words. "The rules follow you home." I dropped out of college the following week. My parents were shocked, my advisors disappointed. I told them I needed a break, a change of direction. I didn't tell them I was running away again. I moved to Boston, a city where I knew no one and had no connections. I found a tiny apartment, took a job stocking shelves at a grocery store, and tried to start over. For a while, it seemed to work. The dreams stopped. The voices faded. I began to sleep through the night again, but I never stopped checking for claw marks on my door every morning. I never stopped wondering what really happened to Sam Rodriguez. And I never, ever went outside after dark if I could help it. Some rules, I realized, weren't just for Joe's farm. Some rules were for surviving whatever had noticed me there. A year passed, then 2. I made a few casual friends, dated occasionally, built something resembling a normal life. The memories of the farm became less immediate, though they never truly went away. On bad nights, I still heard voices calling my name, still saw the cow-headed figure in the shadows of my room. I kept the folder of strange disappearances, adding to it whenever I found new cases that matched the pattern. Elena Reyes was never found. Neither was Sam, or the 3 others I discovered who had vanished from farms within a 100-mile radius of Joe's property over the past decade. Sometimes I thought about going back, not to stay, never to stay, but to demand answers from Joe, to find out what really lived on his land and what it wanted, to learn why Sam had to disappear and what was in those jars in the refrigerator. But I knew I never would. The farm was a nightmare I had barely escaped, and only a fool would walk back into a nightmare voluntarily. So I stayed in the city, surrounded by light and noise and people. I worked my mindless job, paid my rent, and tried not to think about what might have happened if I'd broken more of Joe's rules, if I'd opened the refrigerator again, if I'd entered the barn at night, if I'd walked into the cornfield alone. Some questions are better left unanswered. Some mysteries should remain unsolved. But on quiet nights, when the wind sounds like voices calling my name, I still wonder what's out there in the darkness of Joe Williams' farm. And sometimes, just before falling asleep, I could swear I hear the heavy, uneven footsteps of something walking outside my door.